Me, Research Coordinator at the Institute for Gender Policy Reform. Honestly, if men actually wanted healthy relationships, they'd be willing to do the emotional labor required to process conflict instead of running away like children. That's what I tell myself anyway as I'm reviewing these new survey results that just came across my desk. The numbers make absolutely no sense. We commissioned this study specifically to document emotional abuse patterns in heterosexual relationships. It was supposed to prove what I already knew from years of advocacy work and organizing consciousness-raising groups. Men avoid accountability. Men refuse to engage. Men are emotionally stunted. Except these results are showing something completely different, and I can feel my jaw clenching as I read through page after page. According to this data, when asked about their ideal relationship qualities, 78% of male respondents ranked peaceful home environment as their top priority, not sexual. Availability, not domestic service, not any of the things our framework predicted. Peaceful home environment. I actually laugh out loud at my desk because this has to be bullshit. They're just saying what sounds good, right? Performing for the researchers. But then I keep reading and there's pages of qualitative responses, open-ended questions where they could say anything. And they're all saying the same thing in different ways. I just want to come home and not walk on eggshells. I wish we could have one dinner without it turning into a fight about something I did wrong 3 years ago. I feel like I'm constantly being tested, and I don't even know what the tests are. I'm getting actually angry now, that familiar heat in my chest. These men are painting themselves as victims, as if they're the ones suffering in these dynamics. I've spent 6 years working in this field. I've facilitated dozens of women's support groups. I've heard countless stories of male emotional unavailability and conflict avoidance. And now I'm supposed to believe that men are walking away from relationships because women create too much drama? That's literally just the patriarchal narrative repackaged. I fire off an email to the research team asking about methodology, sample bias, question framing. There has to be an explanation for this. While I wait for their response, I pull up our database of interview transcripts from the previous study. We did in-depth interviews with men who'd left long-term relationships. At the time, I'd coded most of these as demonstrating classic avoidant attachment and commitment phobia. But now I'm reading them again with this new survey data in my head. She would bring up things I said months ago, exact quotes, during every argument. I started just agreeing with everything because disagreeing meant 4 hours of circular conversation. She told me I was gaslighting her when I said I didn't remember conversations that apparently proved I was inconsiderate. Every day I came home to a list of ways I'd disappointed her. I remember dismissing all of this as male fragility when I first coded it. Men who couldn't handle being held accountable for their behavior. Men who wanted to avoid growth and discomfort. But there's this one interview I keep coming back to. The guy was a high school teacher. Married 8 years, 2 kids. He described coming home every day with his stomach in knots. Not knowing what mood he'd encounter, what historical grievance would be litigated that evening. He said he started volunteering for extra committees at work just to delay coming home. Said he loved his wife but felt like he was drowning. And then one day she told him that his refusal to engage with her concerns proved he never really loved her, so he left. When the interviewer asked what he was looking for in future relationships, he said, "Someone who's happy to see me. That's it, just someone who's happy to see me." I'd written in my notes, at the time, subject demonstrates entitled expectation of unconditional positive regard, regardless of behavior. Reading it now, something feels off about my interpretation. My phone buzzes. It's Sarah from the Women's Advocacy Collective asking if I'm coming to Friday's meeting. We've been planning an action targeting a men's rights organization that's been gaining traction on campus. They're spreading rhetoric about how men are unfairly villainized in relationships, which is exactly the kind of backlash narrative we exist to combat. I text back, yes, obviously, then return to the data. The research team responds to my email with a detailed methodology breakdown. Everything looks clean. Representative sample, validated instruments. They also mention they're finding similar patterns in the follow-up focus groups. Men consistently describing hypervigilance in relationships, constant monitoring of partner's emotional state, fear of saying the wrong thing. One of the researchers, a woman I've worked with before, adds a personal note, says this data has made her reflect on her own relationship patterns. She's wondering if we've been missing something important in our analysis. I feel betrayed reading this. She's supposed to be one of us. How is she falling for this victim narrative? I close my laptop harder than necessary and head to the coffee shop downstairs. Standing in line, I overhear two guys talking behind me. I just don't have the energy anymore, you know? Every day it's something new I'm doing wrong. Yeah, man. My ex was like that. Everything was a referendum on my character. Like I'd forget to text back within 10 minutes, and suddenly we're having a 3-hour conversation about my commitment issues. Did you go to therapy? We went to 3 different couples therapists. She said they were all biased because they suggested she might be contributing to the conflict. I want to turn around and explain to them why holding men accountable feels like conflict to them because they're not used to women having boundaries. But something stops me. Maybe it's the exhaustion in their voices. These don't sound like men trying to dodge responsibility. They sound tired. I get my coffee and walk back upstairs, my thoughts spinning. At my desk, I do something I've never done before. I start reading men's forums about relationships. Not the toxic ones, not the pickup artist garbage, just regular guys talking about their experiences. And it's pages and pages of the same themes. I miss feeling like my partner actually likes me. When did spending time together become an obligation instead of something we both enjoy? I feel like I'm constantly being criticized and it's breaking me down. I suggested we do something fun together and she said I was avoiding dealing with our issues. What issues? I don't even know anymore. Everything is an issue. One post has hundreds of comments. Guy asking if it's normal to feel relieved when your partner goes out of town. The responses are heartbreaking. Men describing the physical sensation of tension leaving their bodies when they have the house to themselves. Talking about how they can finally relax, finally breathe. How they spend the whole weekend dreading Sunday night when she comes back. I'm getting defensive reading this. I can feel it. My internal monologue is working overtime. These men just don't want to grow. They want relationships to be easy and comfortable instead of doing the hard work. But then I remember something. I remember David. We dated for 2 years, ended 3 years ago. He was sweet, attentive, really tried. And I spent most of that relationship pointing out all the ways he was falling short. Not because he was actually doing terrible things, but because I'd learned in my organizing work that women settle, that we accept crumbs, that we have to demand more. So I demanded more. More emotional availability, more initiative, more conscious awareness of gender dynamics. I'd come home from advocacy meetings all fired up and he'd bear the brunt of it. Every interaction became a teaching moment. Every minor mistake became evidence of deeper patriarchal conditioning. I remember once he bought me flowers, and I gave him a 20-minute lecture about performative gestures versus actual emotional labor. He just stood there, holding the flowers with this look on his face. I'd felt righteous in that moment, like I was refusing to be placated by cheap romance, while the real issues went unaddressed. But now I'm remembering that look on his face. He wasn't defensive or angry. He just looked sad and tired. The same exhaustion I heard in those guys' voices at the coffee shop. I shake my head, literally physically shake my head to clear the thought. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to gaslight myself into thinking I was the problem. David had issues with emotional availability. That was documented. We talked about it in therapy. Except I'm remembering now that the therapist didn't exactly say he had issues with emotional availability. The therapist suggested we were having complementary communication difficulties. And I'd insisted that was both sidesism. Pushed back until we found a different therapist who used more feminist-informed approaches. We went through 4 therapists. Wait. Those guys in line said his girlfriend went through 3 therapists because they suggested she was contributing to the conflict. I went through 4 because they weren't validating my perspective enough. No, that's different. I had legitimate concerns about male socialization patterns and needed a therapist who understood gender dynamics. But I'm opening my old journal now, the one I kept during that relationship. I documented everything because I was going to write an article about navigating heterosexual relationships as a feminist. Reading through it now, I'm seeing patterns I didn't see before. David came home excited about a promotion, but I needed to address how he dismissed my feelings yesterday by saying I seemed stressed instead of asking what was wrong. He suggested we have a relaxing weekend, but I explained that relaxing is avoidance, and we needed to process the underlying issues in our communication. He said he felt like he couldn't do anything right lately, so we had a long conversation about male fragility and how his feelings of inadequacy were deflection from accountability. Page after page of this. And I remember feeling so justified, so righteous. I was holding the line, refusing to let patriarchal patterns go unchallenged, but reading it now I'm seeing something else. I'm seeing a man who was consistently showing up, being patient, attempting to meet me where I was, and I'm seeing myself turning every single interaction into a confrontation, reframing every gesture of affection as insufficient, interpreting every human mistake as evidence of deeper problems. There's an active entry from 3 weeks before he left. David said he feels like he's walking on eggshells and can't relax around me anymore. I told him that discomfort is growth, and if he really loved me, he'd be willing to sit in that discomfort. He moved out 2 weeks later, told me he couldn't do it anymore, that he felt like he was disappearing, and I'd called him a coward, told all my friends he couldn't handle a strong woman. Wore his departure as a badge of honor in my advocacy work, proof that men will always choose comfort over growth. I'm sitting at my desk and my hands are shaking. I pull up Facebook, something I never do. I look up David's profile. He's engaged. The photos show him with a woman who's looking at him like he hung the moon, and he's smiling in a way I don't remember him smiling with me. There's a lightness to his face. They're at a farmer's market, at a hiking trail, cooking together in a kitchen. Just normal couple things. But what strikes me is his body language. He looks relaxed, open, happy. I scroll back through our old photos together, find one from a camping trip we took about a year before the end. I'm smiling at the camera. He's smiling too, but it doesn't reach his eyes. And his shoulders are slightly hunched, like he's bracing for something. How did I never notice that? I click back to his recent photos. There's one with a caption from his fiancée, grateful every day for a partner who makes life feel easy and joyful. Easy and joyful. I would have scoffed at that before. Relationships aren't supposed to be easy. They're supposed to challenge you. But what if I'm wrong? What if I've been wrong about all of it? My chest is getting tight. I go back to the survey data, the interviews, reading with new eyes. These men aren't describing a desire to avoid accountability. They're describing a desire to stop being treated like adversaries by the people who are supposed to love them. They're describing relationships where affection is conditional on perfect behavior, where every flaw is examined under a microscope, where they can never just be human. One respondent wrote, "I started therapy because she said I needed to work on myself, and my therapist helped me realize the relationship was actually abusive. I was just conditioned to think men couldn't be victims of that." I'd flagged that response as problematic when I first read it, men co-opting abuse language to avoid accountability. But what if he was telling the truth? What if his relationship actually was abusive? What if constant criticism, moving goalposts, historical record-keeping of minor mistakes, refusing to acknowledge positive efforts, creating an environment of hypervigilance, what if those things are actually abusive regardless of the gender of who's doing them? I think about the women's groups I facilitate. We spend hours validating each other's grievances against male partners, and there are real issues, real problems. I'm not denying that, but I'm thinking now about how we frame everything. A man who wants alone time is avoidant. A man who doesn't want to process a conflict for the fourth hour is stonewalling. A man who can't read our minds is emotionally incompetent. A man who gets frustrated is unable to regulate his emotions. But when we want alone time, we're setting boundaries. When we want to process a conflict for hours, we're doing the emotional labor. When we expect them to know what we need without saying it, we're exhausted from having to explain everything. When we get frustrated, we're rightfully angry at patriarchy. I feel sick, actually physically nauseous, because I'm seeing now that I've built an entire framework that makes it impossible for men to do anything right, and I've been so sure, so absolutely certain that I was on the right side. That my anger was righteous, that my demands were reasonable, that men's resistance was proof of their refusal to grow. But what if their resistance was just self-preservation? What if I've been the abusive one? The thought hits me like cold water. I remember a fight David and I had about dishes. He'd washed the dishes but hadn't wiped down the counters. and I'd turned it into an hour-long conversation about mental load and how his inability to see the whole task was a perfect example of how men are socialized to do the bare minimum. He just stood there taking it, and then quietly said, "I thought I was helping," and I'd said, "Helping implies it's my job and you're assisting. This is exactly the problem." He didn't wash dishes again for a week, and I'd complained to my friends about weaponized incompetence. But now I'm seeing his face in that moment. He looked like a child being scolded. And I'd felt powerful, righteous. I was educating him. Except I wasn't educating him. I was breaking him down. I'm crying now, actually crying at my desk. I pull up my email and look at messages from ex-partners over the years. There's a pattern I never noticed before. They all start out enthusiastic, affectionate, trying, and they all slowly start using careful language. "I understand you're upset. I hear what you're saying. You're right, I should have thought of that." They're not actually engaging anymore. They're managing me. And eventually they all stop even doing that. They just go silent and leave. And every single time I've blamed them, told myself they couldn't handle a strong woman, couldn't handle being held accountable, couldn't handle real intimacy. But what if the truth is they couldn't handle being in a relationship where nothing they did was ever good enough? Where every day brought new evidence of their inadequacy, where love was conditional on meeting an impossible and ever-changing standard. I think about my friend circles, the women I organize with. We all have the same stories. Men who couldn't handle us, men who refused to grow, men who chose their comfort over our needs, and we validate each other, endlessly. But what if we're all doing the same thing? What if we've created an ideology that allows us to be terrible partners while feeling morally superior about it? I'm thinking about James, who I dated for 6 months last year. Sweet guy, really gentle. I ended it because he wasn't challenging me intellectually. But what that actually meant was he didn't want to debate gender politics every night. He wanted to watch movies and cook dinner and go for walks. And I'd felt like that was settling. Like I deserved someone who would engage with my ideas. But now I'm realizing he was engaging with me as a whole person, wanting to build a life together. And I was so obsessed with having deep conversations about systemic issues that I couldn't see the depth in simple companionship. He's married now too. I saw it on Instagram a few months ago. His wife posted a picture of him making breakfast with the caption, "This man makes every morning better." And I'd rolled my eyes. Such low standards, celebrating basic adult tasks. But she looked genuinely happy in that photo, and so did he. They were in their kitchen in pajamas, and they were both laughing. When was the last time I laughed like that with a partner? I honestly can't remember. Every relationship I've had has been intense, serious, fraught. I've worn that as a badge of honor. Proof that I'm not shallow, that I care about real issues. But what if I've just been making myself and everyone around me miserable? The survey data is still open on my screen. There's a section I skipped over before about what makes men feel loved. The top answers are straightforward. Physical affection, words of affirmation, quality time, feeling appreciated. Basic stuff. And I remember thinking when I first saw it how simplistic male emotional needs are. But reading it now, I'm struck by how I've withheld all of those things. I've treated affection as something men have to earn through perfect behavior. I've been stingy with appreciation because I didn't want to reward the bare minimum. I've turned quality time into processing sessions. I've replaced words of affirmation with constructive criticism because I believed that's what growth looked like. That's what refusing to settle looked like. But what if it just looks like emotional starvation? I'm full on sobbing now, trying to be quiet because I'm still at the office. I think about all the men I've hurt, all the men I've blamed, all the men I've held up as examples of why heterosexual relationships are fundamentally broken under patriarchy. And they were just human beings trying to love me, trying to build something good. And I systematically destroyed it while telling myself I was holding them accountable. There's a memory surfacing that I've suppressed for years. My dad, pulling me aside at Christmas 4 years ago, asking gently if I was happy, saying he was worried because I seemed angry all the time, and I'd snapped at him, told him my anger was justified, that he, of all people, should understand given how much emotional labor Mom does. He just nodded slowly and said, Your mother and I have been married 36 years because we decided to be on the same team, and I thought he was so naive, so unconscious of the real dynamics. But they're happy. They genuinely enjoy each other. They laugh together every single day. When was the last time I laughed with someone I was dating? When was the last time I treated a partner like we were on the same team instead of adversaries? I pull up the folder with interview transcripts again, really reading them this time. There's one that guts me. The interviewer asked, "What's your happiest relationship memory?" And this guy who'd been describing years of walking on eggshells with his ex-wife said, "The first 3 months before she decided I needed improvement, when she used to smile when I came home." That's it. That's his happiest memory. His partner smiling when he came home. The bar was on the floor. And men still couldn't clear it in these relationships. Not because they weren't trying, but because the bar kept moving. Because nothing was ever good enough. Because we'd decided that acceptance was the same as settling. I think about the language I use in my advocacy work. Don't settle for less than you deserve. Require men to do the work. Hold them accountable. Don't accept the bare minimum. All of it sounds so empowering. But what if I've been teaching women and myself to be impossibly demanding? To treat their partners as perpetual improvement projects? To withhold love and approval as motivation tactics? That's not empowerment. That's just cruelty dressed up in progressive language. And I've built a career on it. I've built an identity on it. I'm supposed to go to the advocacy meeting on Friday and plan actions against men's rights groups. But what if they have a point? Not about everything. There's definitely toxic stuff in those spaces. But what if their core complaint that men are unfairly villainized and their suffering is dismissed? What if that's actually true? What if I've been part of the problem? I'm hyperventilating now. My whole worldview is collapsing. Everything I've believed about relationships, about gender dynamics, about men, it's all built on a foundation of assumption that men are the problem, that male resistance to our demands is proof of their dysfunction, that if relationships fail, it's because men won't do the work. But what if the work we're demanding is impossible? What if we're creating relationships where men are set up to fail? I think about my mom's advice when I was younger. Be kind to whoever you're with, that's the secret. And I dismissed it as her generation's internalized misogyny. Women being taught to be nice and accommodating. But maybe kindness isn't accommodation. Maybe kindness is just basic human decency. Maybe treating your partner with gentleness and appreciation and grace isn't settling. Maybe it's the actual foundation of sustainable love. I look at my calendar and see I have a coffee meeting tomorrow with a new member of our advocacy group. Young woman, just out of college, bright and passionate. She reminds me of myself 10 years ago, and I'm supposed to mentor her. Teach her how to navigate heterosexual relationships without compromising feminist principles. But what am I going to tell her now? Don't do what I did. Don't spend years making good men feel like they're fundamentally broken. Don't build an ideology that makes lasting love impossible. I don't know what to do with this realization. It's too big. It means everything I've built my adult life around is wrong. It means I've hurt people I loved. It means I've been the toxic one. I'm the common denominator in all these failed relationships. And I've spent years blaming everyone else, telling myself men just can't handle strong women. But strength isn't the same as cruelty. Having standards isn't the same as having impossible standards. Asking for growth isn't the same as demanding perfection. I've confused all of those things. I've weaponized therapy language and feminist theory to justify being someone no one could ever make happy. Because deep down, I don't think I believed I deserved to be happy. I believed I deserved to be right. And I've sacrificed actual love and connection on the altar of being right. The survey data is still on my screen. Men just want peace. They want to come home to someone who's happy to see them. They want to feel appreciated. They want to stop walking on eggshells. They want relationships that add to their lives instead of draining them. That's not patriarchy. That's not fragility. That's just basic human need. And I've been treating those needs as evidence of dysfunction. I need to cancel the Friday meeting or go and say something completely different than what's planned. I need to rethink everything. I need to apologize to so many people, starting with David and James and the others whose names I can barely think right now because the shame is overwhelming. I was so sure. so absolutely certain I was fighting the good fight, that my anger was righteous, that I was on the right side of history. But I've just been someone who made the people who loved me miserable, and called it activism. The sun is setting outside my office window. I need to go home. I live alone. I've always told myself it's because I refuse to compromise my standards. But the truth settling over me now is that I've driven everyone away, and then blamed them for leaving. I close my laptop. My face is wet with tears, and I don't care who sees. For the first time in years, I'm seeing clearly. And what I see is that I've been wrong. About everything. About men, about relationships, about myself. I was the problem. I was the toxic one. I was the source of all that dysfunction I spent so much energy documenting and analyzing, and now I have to figure out how to live with that, how to be different, how to actually become the person I thought I was, someone who makes the world better instead of making the people in it miserable. I don't know if it's possible to change this much, to unlearn this many patterns, but I have to try, because this anger, this certainty, this righteousness, it hasn't made me happy. It's made me alone, and it's hurt people who deserved better. The elevator doors close, and I see my reflection. I look exhausted, and I realize I've been exhausting to be around. No wonder they all left. No wonder they chose peace. I denied them any.